esteemed trainers, speed control is going to be the increments that are going to sway momentum. So let's not wait around. Let's get into this match. Tornadus and Ogerpon out for Davide, and on Shoma's side, leading with that iconic duo of the Iron Crown and the Indeedee.
Yeah, well, the Iron Crown here for Shoma in a really strong position where it's got that Psychic Terrain set up. It's got the booster energy we're seeing activating now, which will give it a boost to its special attack, making that expanding force even stronger. Both Pokemon on Davide's side are going to be susceptible to that expanding force, and when you've got something like the Indeedee with the Follow Me that can pull in those attacks, keep it safe for at least one turn, or even help in hand boost that attack, it's making Davide have to react here, and exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah, adjustments straight away here as Iron Crown joins the field. Says, thank you, my opponent, for setting up that Psychic Terrain. My Iron Crown can come in and benefit. It's going to have its Quark Strike activated by that booster energy, so its special attack is going to be strengthened as well. Terrestrialization also happening. This game is moving.
Yeah, well, the one thing that we might see from Davide might be a Terrestrialization on the Tornadus to get around the weakness of that Psychic type, but not seeing it here. Wanting to kind of keep the Powder Dry for later turns as we see the Indeedee go for that Terrestrialization into the Dragon type. Tornadus just protecting here, wants to keep itself as safe as possible, but we are going to see the Iron Crown getting an expanding force off. Nice switch in from the Iron Crown on Davide. So he's going to be able to take that a little bit better than probably some of the other options that they had out on the field.
Yeah, well, you're going to be able to see some speed control coming through from this Indeedee. The little dragon type indeed going for this Trick Room. So it is now going to be reversing the speed. So those slower Pokemon going to be moving first. I think it's nice then that the Protect went through onto that Tornadus instead of maybe changing up speed that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think preserve that for later. Now you've got the job if you want to take advantage of that Ogerpon and then the Tornadus. You've got to stall out these Trick Room turns before you're able to do that. And the best way to do that is by switching around, protecting, stalling out, and really reducing the damage. Another Pokemon that you can see Davide kind of hovering over whether or not to switch out the Tornadus for now, as their own Indeedee kind of setting up a similar bold position to what Shoma's got. But what Shoma has the advantage of now is being able to be in the position where I can just put damage out into the field constantly now. I don't need to worry about being threatened by a knockout immediately here with either of my two Pokemon from what you're presenting with.
Well, now we're in the mirror. The Indeedee and Iron Crown, a piece on the stage, as Indeedee on Shoma's side goes for this helping hand to boost up the Iron Crown next to it. But it's going to be the Iron Crown on Davide's side that blinks first. Big damage into the opposing Indeedee as the opposing one responds with that Tachyon Cutter.
Tachyon Cutter getting some big damage and picking up the knockout onto the Indeedee that's just switched in. This is not great for Davide, because bringing that in is a supporting option here for this Trick Room that's now set up, but losing that pivotal piece of the puzzle, forcing something that probably isn't as comfortable out in the field into a situation where it is going to be susceptible to that expanding force, if that is the option. The Indeedee obviously not loving the expanding force from Davide's side because of that Terrestrialization. So does Shoma want to preserve that here for later on in the game? The problem is you don't have Protect on it, so it's a bit of a sitting duck here. You can go for a helping hand, though. That would be really beneficial to your own Iron Crown. Get some additional damage before it does eventually go down. And
that's what that Indeedee is doing here, going for a second helping hand on Shoma's side as Ogerpon just goes for that defensive passive play, getting up the spiky shield, not wanting to take any unnecessary damage in this turn as the Tachyon Cutter finds its mark onto the opposing Iron Crown. The second hit comes through, not going to be able to get a knockout this time, but still respectable damage despite not being very effective at all. Iron Crown on Davide's side can retaliate with that expanding force, going to be getting that spreader type damage. Will fell the Indeedee on the opposing side, but these Iron Crowns, even though they're going into each other, they're not getting those KOs.
Yeah, and you can see how beneficial that helping hand support was from the Indeedee on Shoma's side. That Tachyon Cutter, not quite enough to pick up the knockout, but probably putting the Iron Crown on Davide's side into range from an expanding force now. And then when you bring in the Urshifu, we've already talked about Lou in the team overview. It's got that choice band. It's going to be hitting extremely hard. Got access to priority attacks. It's not really going to be able to utilize this turn with the Psychic Terrain in effect, but it will be able to lean into some of those other options that it's got here and potentially do some big damage. But has to be careful around maybe getting a little bit complacent in front of that Ogerpon that can provide big damage. So you've got to cover that with your expanding force before you launch one of those big wicked blows out into the field.
Well, no big damage coming through from the Ogerpon this time. Instead, going for that Follow Me, protecting the Iron Crown as the Surging Strikes will find its mark. 3 guaranteed critical hits. Is it going to be able to get enough for a knockout? I think that third one is going to remove the Ogerpon from play. And then Davide down 2 Pokemon early doors in this set.
What am I saying? Wicked Blow. I'm on about Surging Strike. The Urshifu spot brown, but huge. Yeah, really going to perform well under these Trick Room environments. And then the Tachyon Cutter coming out from the Iron Crown on Shoma's side. And really, I think one of the things that you would always look at with setting Trick Room up for yourself is taking advantage of those Trick Room turns.
Yes.
Shoma doing that perfectly in this game and leaving that Soul Tornadoes coming in to be able to deal with these two powerhouses on the opposite side of the field.
And I think as well, when you see a Tornadoes, you do see the speed going faster mode operated, I guess. And so being able to have that utility to go for the Trick Room, considering as well that Davide didn't have Indeedee on the field yet, it is running that Imprison. It could potentially try and imprison the Trick Room and stop Shoma from getting the speed control in his play field. Then it just gave such a great opportunity for Shoma to be able to showcase that beautifully.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, just so well done there. It's a bit similar to Swiss Round 1 with Victor and how they were one step of the game along the whole way. But Shoma doing that against Davide, and you saw the adjustments that Davide instantly had to make at the start of the game, ending up with their own Iron Crown and Indeedee on the field. But in the process of doing that, took that huge Tachyon cutter, which just removed the Indeedee quite easily and then set up the position where everything else that came in after that next to the Iron Crown for Davide was pressured, so they had to protect to stall out that Trick Room, which then opened the door for the ability to put the damage down that you needed to chip away at Davide's Iron Crown. Once that fell, the Trick Room still in effect, it was kind of curtains from there.
I think as well you make a great observation about the Tachyon cutter being so pivotal, because sometimes in these situations when you've got the utility to go for that expanding force, not only does it hit both Pokemon, but you get the extra, damage from the Psychic Terrain being in play. It's got to be tempting to just go for damage on both Pokemon, keep chipping away at them, but then going for that single target attack with the Tachyon cutter, being able to hit it double, even if it's not very effective, getting so much relentless damage on the board did show that Shoma was able to kind of pick his mark and go, this is where I'm going to target down, this is where I'm going to get the knockout. And Davide just had to adjust and unfortunately stumbled in the end game.
Yeah, and you've got to think coming into game 2, you're going to want to try and tie this up. Do you go with a bit more of a similar lead to what Shoma went for there and bring your own Indeedee and Iron Crown from the get-go and have your maybe big hitters in the back to come in to do the cleanup job, like Shoma probably kind of set up their game plan, copy that blueprint and kind of go toe-to-toe and say, well, if you're going to come at me with your big hitters to start with, even though we're not super effective against each other, we can do the same thing and then bring it down to 2 versus 2, which might suit Davide a bit better than what it does Shoma. So we'll see how the adjustments going into game 2.
Well, if Shoma predicts that, though, you can always adjust things on your side with your faster mode in the form of that adorable little Whimsicott, but looks can be deceiving. It's paired up with that Urshifu. Now, potential something like a Tailwind coming through would be giving this Urshifu so much momentum. You'd be fast, you'd be furious, but Indeedee threatening that Trick Room on the other side.
Yeah, you can see Davide going for that Psychic Spam lead. It's going to be very threatening here. The Indeedee gives support, but the one thing that you've got up your sleeve for Shoma is a defensive terrestrialization on your choice band Urshifu. Going for that Steel Terror type, going to put you out of harm's way from those Psychic moves from the Tachyon cutter, and you also have the Whimsicott. It might not be able to be that impactful here, and you probably don't want to click the Tailwind with the impending potential Trick Room from the opposite side of the field, but you do have Light Screen, and that is going to be so valuable for not only the rest of the team, but more importantly, protecting this Urshifu and allowing it to get the damage that it needs early in this game.
Well, Indeedee not going for a Trick Room here, instead drawing in all of this potential damage as Whimsicott fearlessly just goes straight for that Tailwind here, as the Urshifu now in a prime position to adjust that ball position. Super effective U-turn. That's a choice band U-turn. Look how much damage that did. It does take a little bit of chip from the Rocky Helmet, but I think the trade was more than worth it, and it can nurse its wounds in the back now in that Pokeball, as Shoma has the potential to bring out another Pokemon to apply more pressure to this Iron Crown. It's going to be an Iron Crown together, and we saw how that went in game 1.
Yeah, and the Indeedee taking so much damage now, and I think Shoma kind of having a bit of a sigh of release there, seeing the Follow Me come out and not the Trick Room as an option there, because now your Tailwind is so valuable, right? Because now that Indeedee is going to be in the position where an Expanding Force will be enough to pick up the knockout onto that Pokemon, and Whimsicott's got that speed control set up, half of its job's done. It's going to be able to get that Light Screen in its next turn and leave the kind of the hard work, the muscle work to that Iron Crown on their side, making things for Davide again really difficult to get a foothold in this game.
I mean, Davide in a position now where there's no speed control utility. As you said, yes, there's a Trick Room, but it's going to go down to an Expanding Force. That U-turn put in so much work on Urshifu's side. And now with that Whimsicott as well, Whimsicott has to watch out. It can't go for its priority when Psychic Terrain is on the field. So things like Encore coming through, not going to be able to utilize that. Doesn't want to go for a second Tailwind, there's no point. You could go for a Light Screen, try and boost up your special defense, but critically, you can even go for the Moonblast, just start chipping away.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that could be enough to then take the Expanding Force into a single target attack. But we're seeing a helping hand, last-ditch effort from the Indeedee on Davide's side as that light screen is set up from that Whimsicott.
Yeah, this is nice. Just means that you're not going to take as much damage from Expanding Force. One Tachyon Cutter is enough to be able to fell the Indeedee. That in its last hurrah did go for that helping hand to help out the Iron Crown on Davide's side that retaliates with the Tachyon Cutter of its very own. Knowing it's going to hit twice, does a sizable amount of damage. Another one of those is going to be able to get the knockout.
Yeah, and I like this play from Davide because it's quite an easy option to go for the Expanding Force. It's just cheaper way at things, but I think if you do that, you get rid of the Whimsicott. That's something that Shoma probably wants to happen so they can get something like the Ogerpon onto the field and put that immediate pressure on. But Davide not out of this yet. Bringing in the Tornadoes, got access to their own Tailwind, so can set that up now. Then we'll have to be a little bit wary about the following turn if you don't remove the Whimsicott, because there is that encore. So you have to kind of take the turn, set your own Tailwind up, and make sure that you remove that piece of Shoma's puzzle. So you've got a bit of an easier route back into this game.
Yeah, as the Tornadoes is flying up in the sky, it doesn't fall victim to the Psychic Terrain, protecting it from those prankster moves. As well, actually, you know, on reflection, a second Tachyon Cutter may not be enough to get the opposing Iron Crown because there was the helping hand in play before. So possibly you have to be in a position to think, can I remove it with a double up some way from Tornadoes, or is the Tailwind match? Is that more important?
Well, we are going to see how things play out in this next turn, but before that, we do see the Terastallization committed from Davide's side, and it is going to be on the Tornadoes, taking away that Psychic weakness there, and the Moonblast as well, a really good defensive Terastallization.
Yeah, the Expanding Force coming through from the speedier side of Shoma's team here. Going to be doing a sizable amount of damage to Tornadoes, but it was not going for a Tailwind here. It can always go for it on the next terminal cross, and you've got rid of that pesky little Whimsicott. Don't have to worry about Encore. I mean, you wouldn't have to worry about it anyway now that you're a grounded Pokemon again with that Steel typing, but it puts, I think, a little bit more of momentum back into Davide's side, particularly as the Tachyon Cutter is going to come through. It's not enough to be able to get that KO, as it does not have the helping hand, but it looks like it's now in such a vulnerable position. Davide might have a way through it in the next turn.
Maybe. It depends on what Shoma brings in here. If the Urshifu comes onto the field, it's still going to have its own Tailwind set up. So it can then supersede the Tailwind setup from Davide's side on the Tornadoes. Get an Aqua Jet into that Pokemon before it can attack. The problem is you're leaving the Iron Crown alone on Davide's side, which could put you in the position where an Expanding Force could just be hit out, and then you potentially, with the damage that you've already taken on your own Iron Crown, turn the table, flip it completely, and you lose two Pokemon at the cost of just being able to remove a Tailwind aspect on your opponent's team when yours is about to run out.
That's very true, and you can see our trainers as well utilizing every second they have for this window of adjustment to be able to think through how the turn is going to play ahead. Davide has a leg back into this match, but Shoma brings out that Ogerpon. How does this change things?
Well, now you've got access to the Tailwind immediately because there's no priority on that Ogerpon to really pick up the knockout onto the Tornadoes. But you are putting a lot of pressure immediately onto the Iron Crown now with your own Ogerpon because it can't Terastallize. It's going to have that fire weakness. So the Ivy Cudgel going to provide big damage there, potentially a knockout. And it is currently, even if Davide sets up their own Tailwind for this next turn at least, going to be outspeeded by that Ogerpon. So it is going to be threatened. Do you go for a Protect on your Iron Crown and kind of sacrifice the Tornadoes, get your Tailwind up, and then the next turn, whatever you've got waiting in the back can come in alongside the Iron Crown, take full advantage of that Tailwind for the next few turns.
That's the thing. He's played it very slow and cautiously with this Tailwind, wanting to unleash it at the right time. You've removed on Shoma's side the utility to set up a second Tailwind, so now you're in a position where yours can shine. Looks like it's just going to be a defensive play on the Iron Crown side of things, though, as Tornadoes does go right ahead and get that Tailwind set up. As you mentioned, Lee, it's not going to worry too much if it goes down, because then Davide can bring in a Pokemon from the back to utilize that greatly. However, Ogerpon not going into the Tornadoes, so it's not going to be able to get the knockout there as the Expanding Force comes through. But is this going to be enough?
That's the question, and I think if you're Shoma, you're probably hoping that it's not on the Tornadoes. You don't want to allow something to come in, but it is enough to take down the Tornadoes with such little health, even though that is a resisted attack. Now, this opens the door perfectly for Davide, where they can bring in that next two Pokemon, can take full advantage of the Tailwind. As you see the Tailwind just ending at probably the wrong time for Shoma.
Yeah, but the right time for Davide. You have the Tailwind up on your side now, time to take advantage of it. And look at that, Lee. We're once again in a mirror. It's an Ogerpon and an Iron Crown apiece. However, the Ogerpon on Davide's side looking so healthy, as well as the Iron Crown, compared to some damage that's been severely dealt out on Shoma's side. Yeah,
that's it. I think now Davide maybe started the game off not looking as good, like Shoma was getting their foot in and maybe getting that momentum building that they already got in game one, but really not doing that. Davide having a game plan from the outset and saying, okay, let's get through these initial turns of Tailwind, let's get through this light screen that's going to fade in a couple of turns' time, and now start putting on the pressure, and now it's time to take advantage of the speed control I've got access to.
Well, first to move is going to be the spiky shield on Shoma's, which was a perfect call as the Ivy Cudgel was coming through on Davide's side. So not going to be able to get damage on the board here. The expanding force from the Iron Crown will come through and connect down onto Shoma's here. Now this expanding force is going to be enough to be able to get the knockout. So now on Davide's side, you don't have to worry too much about an expanding force coming back your way. I think Ogopon got away with it there. You know, you going into a spiky shield and leaving yourself vulnerable to a potential expanding force could have been devastating.
Yeah, and now the one thing that you would say is going to make those expanding forces not as threatening as that psychic terrain disappearing, and it opens the door up now for the Urshifu. Now, it could have come in before and used the Aquajet on the Tornadus. It actually couldn't have because of the Trustalization, so it was grounded. Yeah. But now that psychic terrain has been removed, it does have access to that priority attack. It is choice banded. Problem is, does it have enough in the tank to take down these pretty healthy Pokemon on Davide's side? Because it doesn't, I feel like it's going to be very close, but maybe not quite enough.
I'm trying to think, has Shoma used Terrestrialization in this game? It was the Dragon in DD in game 1.
Not this game, so they do have it in their back pocket here. So that's one thing that they could do. We talked about the defensive Terrestrialization that the Urshifu has. The problem is, if you go for that Steel Terra on the Urshifu, you become susceptible to the Ivy Cudgel on Davide's Ogopon. But you do have this Follow Me for at least one turn to kind of help protect you, because the Expanding Force, not a double target attack now, is single target, so that all will be pulled into your Ogopon. Can you take advantage of your Urshifu while you've got the opportunity to?
I mean, Ogopon is really paving the way here for Urshifu to try and take game number 2 for Shoma. Everything is focused down, the spotlight on the Urshifu as it goes for that Surging Strikes. Guaranteed 3 critical hits will connect down into the Iron Crown and remove it from play. But as you said, you know, you still have to contend with this Ogopon in the next turn.
The one problem in this situation that Davide's got is going to be that it doesn't have access to a grass-type attack. Normally, you would see the Ogopon have either Grassy Glide or the Wood Hammer, but it doesn't have either of those, relying on the Ivy Cudgel, which is not going to be effective at all, and then it is going to be susceptible to going down to the Surgeon Strike. 1, 2, 3, will it be enough? If it is, it's going to mean that Shoma is going to win this set.
And with that third Surging Strike, that's exactly how the story plays out, Lee. Shoma Honami wins Swiss round 2 in a 2-0 thriller against Davide Carrette.
Amazing play from Shoma from start to finish. You know, I mean, against such a tough opponent as well.